Please welcome Claudine Cheever, Global Head of Brand and Fixed Marketing with Amazon, and Cecilia Ambrose, Senior Manager UX Design with Amazon Fresh, Prime Now, and Whole Foods Market.
Hello, everybody. Hi, Cecilia.
Hi, Claudine.
How are you doing? I'm trying to make sure that my camera's not at a weird angle. Okay, there we go. All right. Well, this is so exciting. Thank you, everyone, for joining us at the 3% conference. I've been listening to some of the other speakers, and there have been some great tips and really great ideas about the future of work. And it's just been a really exciting day. So hopefully we will continue on that thread. And so what we wanted to do was just introduce each other. And I'm going to introduce Cecilia first. And we thought we would use the 3 questions that were asked of each presenter around what's happening right now, what might happen next, and what exciting opportunities for creativity and belonging does this current situation open up. So starting with Cecilia, Cecilia has actually been at Amazon for almost 6 years, and she is an incredible UX design leader. And for Cecilia, what's happening for her right now is that history is happening. We're navigating through chaos, uncertainty, and discomfort. And I love this answer, Cecilia, because it is a really hard time, but I think we're also going to look back on this and be proud of a lot of the changes and hopefully be proud of the progress we made in thriving through discomfort. So I'm kind of optimistic about that. What might happen next? Cecilia is excited about redesigning our systems, structures, and lives for meaning, equity, accountability, and purpose. Totally love that and 100% agree with that. And what exciting opportunities for creativity and belonging does this open up? This answer is so characteristically optimistic of you, Cecilia. I love it. Cecilia's response to this was, I will look back at this time and feel reassured that even in the worst of times, there's love, connection, and community. In my experience, creativity thrives in chaos and it finds the light and opportunity. And I love that, and I couldn't agree more. So thank you for joining me, Cecilia.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm honored. It's my turn, right?
Yeah, it's your turn.
Awesome. So Claudine is our fearless leader for Master Brand, our parent brand at Amazon. And I'm honored to share the virtual stage. I've really enjoyed getting to know Claudine through this process, and I loved her answer to what's happening now. So Claudine has not worn pants without elastic waistband for 133 days. And I had to read that because I was so worried that I would say that you hadn't worn pants.
Well, no one would know, would they?
Nobody would know in this remote session. So similar, this resonated with me because you said that you've gotten closer to a lot of friends beyond passively doing so in social media. So there's been some connections there for you, and that your team, their mood and their outlook has improved as they've just crushed a bunch of challenges and deliverables. So that's great to hear. I think we're very lucky to work with incredible talent and teams at Amazon. So what might happen next, new ways of connecting will become normal. I'm curious what you were thinking there.
I think just the video chatting and chatting in the video window and all of these things, one of the things I've noticed in my meeting is people are starting to do the side chat. If someone's doing a presentation and so, ooh, that's cute. Oh, I like that color. And so I feel like all this technology is becoming more and more human. And what felt really awkward at the beginning is now, it feels really just comfortable to connect this way. I don't think we're getting better at it, and it's becoming more normal.
Yeah, no, I agree. And last but not least, what exciting opportunities does this open up for creativity and belonging? And you think that this really pushes us to think differently, but also just the gift of unlearning and relearning long held beliefs and almost challenging our assumptions. So I loved your answer there. It definitely forces us to think differently and push for changes.
Great. Awesome. Well, cool. Well, I'm going to just open this up. We have our first slide here, and just a little bit of a preamble. On March 4th, Amazon was one of the first companies in Seattle, and I think one of the leading companies nationwide to migrate our entire corporate work base to the work from home model. And so we really stepped into this new environment that you've been hearing about all day long. We don't use Zoom. We have our own internal version of it called Chime. And so it's very similar to Zoom. It doesn't have maybe as many of the fancy features like, cool backgrounds and things like that. But we've really obviously been leaning into that. And as work from home has become this extended reality, we've been really listening more, learning more, and taking chances. And one of the exciting things about Amazon is seeing the technology roadmap to Chime and being able to have input to features that can make it better and make it work better for our teams. And I think we're all just developing more video tech fluency. And that's something that we were talking about just a second ago, Cecilia. So one of the things that we want to do is share a set of tenets that we've been developing to guide our work from home behavior. And at Amazon, tenets are really important guiding principles that help guide how we work. They guide how we share learnings and how we create consistency. So as you're working on a project over time and you start noticing that certain things always work a certain way, you'll say, I wonder if we should write a tenet around this. And the idea is that as you're working on a project, you have tenets so that you can push down the project or hand it off to somebody, and you don't necessarily have to be in the room for it to happen, for it to still meet the bar and have the same consistency. We always start the list of tenets with the words, unless you know better, ... And that's a really core part of Amazon's culture that I'm finding is really resonant right now, because what it signals is self-awareness of our own bias. I think these tenets are right, but I don't know everything. And it acknowledges that there is an incomplete and complex view of situations. So I really like the inherent humility in that, and the fact that we're always updating these and changing these situations. We get more information. Cecilia, I'd love anything you would add on how you and your team use tenets to operate.
Yeah, I love tenets. I agree, +1, everything you said. For me, they're debatable. So it's just one perspective. And what I've seen them used for is just guiding principles, whether it's strategic programs, digital products, just reviews of team charters and mission statements. And for me, they have to be memorable. They have to help you make decisions and trade-offs in your work. So I've found them super helpful and effective in leading teams.
Yeah, they have tension in them, right? They have inherent tension in them. And often you'll have tenets that tend to contradict each other. So they're not rules and they're not meant to be followed blindly. They actually create a nice energy around the work that we're doing.
Yeah, more of a conversation. So without further ado, I think we have these are not in any particular order, by the way, or significance. It's just organized in that way. But we have our first tenet for discussion. This is anything but normal. So this refers to working remotely in an agile environment. I think we've heard things like work-life balance, work-life integration, and what we've seen now is that all of us are navigating this life merging into work, or bleeding into work, and work bleeding into life, where people are both coworkers, teachers, they're parenting at the same time simultaneously. Very impressive. We've had toddlers, teenagers, my favorite's pets. I have a boxer that whines about her ball all the time or barks at the UPS driver. So they've lent for just quirky and peculiar video conferencing habits that everybody's just embraced. And I think, Claudine, you have some awards that your team has done?
Yes, we even, so given it's called Chime, we did an award ceremony in my team called the Chimies. And that was just awards, and my team got so into it. It was incredible. It was like the Oscars, and the awards were for all of those weird things that happened, that the first time they happened, they're embarrassing, but then you just have to sort of embrace them. So best extras casting, which includes, cats that walk across the computer. Best original soundtrack, which I won because my kids were at home and my husband likes to use the blender in the morning to make smoothies. So I always have a lot of background noise. My kids are in the office and I've been working down in the dining room. So I won for best original soundtrack. And then of course, there's always everyone's favorite, the witness protection program, which is the person who either doesn't ever turn on their camera or they're so backlit and dark and silhouetted that you never really know who they are. So One of our new creative directors, Joe Shoesmith, who actually did the intro to this session, she actually came on board during this work from remote. We hired her and she started. Her experience actually has been how quickly she got to know people and how quickly she developed relationships with them. But we were laughing the other day that she's actually never seen her team from the shoulders down. So these are kind of like really interesting things. So it is definitely not normal, but there's a lot of really interesting positive things. The second tenet we have is just, it has to work. And, this one is something that, again, we're always working on because there's a lot of sort of infrastructure and physical aspects to this. I love what the Canadian Prime Minister said about work from home. It was something around, it's not work from home, it's surviving from home, trying to work. And I think having that in the back of my head has been really important when thinking about what the team is going through. Most people have never imagined their home would be a fully functioning office, or with multiple people, even a whole family kind of needing a secure, safe place to work. So we've encouraged and invested in making sure our teams get the tools, tech, and equipment they need, but also just making sure that we can help develop hacks to build remote work. So as I mentioned earlier, the Chime, we're always updating this technology, but we don't wait necessarily to get a request on the roadmap for the next optimization for Chime. We find workarounds, we find hacks to share streaming video, and particularly when we're in production, we've had to develop our own hacks. So, just this morning, I had someone on my team working from her car because their internet in her home was being serviced and her car has internet. So, for my team, also includes people who do want to go into the office, and that's okay too. So, I have some people who are single, they live alone, and they just really want to get out of the apartment and go for a walk. And one of the things that we're doing when we have, now that we're in a little bit of a blended, where we have a few people in the office and the majority at home, is we are not going to do any in-person meetings at all. Even if we all go back to the office and there's a small percentage still at home, we're going to continue to lean into the video interface, because what it does is it keeps it very equitable. Everyone's on the screen at the same time. And it kind of makes me remember when we used to have meetings in the office and there'd be one or two people on video conference. You'd forget about them. You wouldn't even know they were there. And so they were a silent voice in the room. So that's one of the things that we want to make sure that we continue to actually, the nice sort of leveling of the playing field of video technology. How can we continue to maintain that even when the situation maybe returns a little bit more back to normal?
I love that. I've led global teams, and I think that the equity is a huge factor in just having everybody feel inclusive, included. And also, it's similar to Joe, I drove cross country while I was interviewing for my current role. And so my interviews were in the car with the cell phone hotspot. It actually worked really, really well. So I love the tenet of like, whatever needs to work and however you can make it happen, you just make it happen. And people are very amendable and acceptable to it.
Yeah, totally. The next one is about protecting each other's time. And I think this tenet we developed probably a couple of months in, because there were a lot of things that we were doing that just were not sustainable. And I think it's a good best practice as leaders about once every 2 weeks or once every 30 days to just kind of do an audit of all the different mechanisms that people have developed and make sure that we're getting rid of those ones that we all developed when we were in this sort of like, well, this is going to be a few weeks, we can get through it. And then all of a sudden those things that you were doing to get through it now have to be adopted long time. And that can really wear teams down and not be sustainable. So just because we're virtual, it doesn't mean we're not human. And so people just can't thrive if they don't have time to read, think, write, or eat and sleep and simply live. And before Randy, I really love the panel around, parents who are working at home with what I call full attention age children. My kids are 11 and 13, and they had a fantastic remote schooling. So it's been a lot easier, but I have a lot of people on my team with young children. So one of the things that we do is we keep 2 hours of every day meeting free between 11 and 1. You can do that to have lunch with your kids. You can do that to catch up on email if you wanted it to work. I always use some of it to go for a quick bike ride. I put it on Strava. I'm not afraid to be transparent with my team that I'm taking time off, because unless I'm taking time off, they won't take time off. We also, one of my favorite things we did that was pretty like a cheap and easy trick was set a 1 hour meeting and ended at 50 minutes. and it gives people the 10 minutes to breathe. And our campus is very dispersed here in Seattle, and there's a lot of times you'll have meetings in different buildings, and I've forgotten, what I've realized is how much that activity during the day really helped me get through a long day. And so making sure that we find ways to replicate that and give people just a little bit of extra time between meetings, so they're not going back to back to back to back.
No, that makes perfect sense. And also just to get up and walk about, right?
Totally.
Just back-to-back meetings, even if they're 30-minute meetings, you need to stretch, you need to go eat something, go outside, get vitamin D. Definitely add that. Our team has embraced free meeting Fridays, and it's helped the team ease into the weekend, where right now you're kind of in this time continuum where I don't know if it's Monday or Thursday or Saturday. It kind of blends together just because you're home all the time. And so just no meetings and focused time really, really helps the team on Friday. And also to just catch up on work, right? Because between meetings, you can't actually be executing and as effective. So that's what we've adopted that's been successful. So our next tenet is the person is the priority. I believe we're on number 4. I don't know how we're doing on time, but let me know. So for this tenet, what we meant by this is that the first 5 minutes of every meeting have nothing to do with the business at hand. And it has everything to do with getting a temperature and the pulse on the team or the person and people that you're interacting with. And I think what I've gotten used to, and it's almost a muscle that I'm building, is Chime has a chat at the side of it, almost like a text thread that's very similar almost to Twitch, because sometimes there's a whole different conversation happening on the chat.
Oh, I love the side chat. The side chat is the best.
It's like shout outs, small positive comments, like the works. And like, I have to shift because like, I'll be focused in what like we're discussing and present in the conversation. And then there's a whole different thing happening. I would also add that in having the person be the priority, that you could blow up agendas, right? That it could flow with how the conversation or the dialogue is going and not necessarily sticking to a structured or regimented meeting notes or objectives. And that's been really helpful, just to be that fluid with the work.
Yeah, I agree. And also seeing when team members see that happen, it really reinforces that they're important. And the one sort of added little observation I have in that is it's also important in that, when you're all sort of gathering in the meeting and everyone's kind of waiting for it to start, to just pay attention to that pre-meeting banter and chatter, that you're not talking about anything that might make anyone feel uncomfortable, or that you might, you want to think about just being inclusive in that chat. And I go back to an anecdote from earlier in my career when I went into a meeting and I was the only woman in the room, and all the guys were talking about, I think it was a football game at Stanford, I don't remember, but the effect on it for me was I felt totally excluded. And I just felt like my power was taken away in that meeting because I didn't have anything to participate in that pre-meeting banter. And I think that applies for Chime as well, that, we tend to talk about what are you watching on TV? Just you don't want to overthink it, but that's just a good sort of thing to be sensitive about.
Well, I adopted your Chimes Award since we've been developing this content. And
I love it.
Sprint this week with an Argentine soccer chant. And then the other day we picked, I guess Taylor Swift came with a new soundtrack. So we hit that the first 5 minutes and it just rallied the team. It's just something fun to do. But it's been interesting. A lot of awkward.
I love that. All right, so the next one is me, right? So the next one is, well, that's awkward. This is around being okay, being awkward, and getting back to the inclusivity part. One of the things that we've always, that everyone knows, and this is even in an in-person meeting, is there's an expectation, there's a bias in a lot of corporate culture, which is sort of based on sort of white male norms, that you're going to stand up, you're going to talk confidently, you're going to own the room, all this stuff. Well, not everyone has that style. Not every culture has that style. And there's also a lot of diversity in how people think about things. A lot of people can't necessarily be in the hot spot and immediately think on their feet, or maybe they feel uncomfortable, or I know I tend to get emotional sometimes. So some people need time to go away and think and come back. So one of the things we're trying to do to avoid that interruptitis that happens in Chime when everyone's just talking over each other is we do practice a 4-second pause between comments as much as possible. And when someone says something or asks a question, it's okay if you don't immediately answer. It's okay if not everyone in the room immediately on the video room immediately jumps in, and allowing some of that breathing room is really important. It's really, really hard to do because it feels uncomfortable. And as leaders, we want to kind of jump in and help people out. But sometimes just not saying anything and letting a hard question sit there is actually really, really important, because then it allows people who have different styles of how they want to react, speak up. Also, I've noticed some people like to kind of write their comments in the chat as well. And so that's equally good. So the tendency to want to speak up always and interrupt each other and chime really biases towards that more sort of type A personality. And so making sure that we're not allowing the technology to keep people silent who might be struggling with that. And I have one anecdote from an all hands meeting we had where we gathered everyone together and we were talking a lot about diversity and equity. And then someone sent in a question. The way I do Q&A in my all hands is I have my someone is the recipient of all the questions, and then they send them to me. So they're not completely anonymous, but there's some buffer and feeling of security. And someone had said, I'm a person of color. I'm not Black, but I am a person of color, and I felt, marginalized, and I've felt microaggressions. And please don't forget about there are more of us who are subject to this. And it was, I didn't know how to respond at all. And there was a silence, and then it got awkward. And then finally someone chimed in and said, that was really brave. And then someone else chimed in and said, thank you so much for saying that. And it was actually the best thing to have that moment of silence. And in fact, I think the teams appreciated that I was a little caught off guard, and I just owned my vulnerability in that moment of not quite knowing how to respond. And I think that gets back to that discomfort you talked about, Cecilia, and how that's totally okay. And it just feels so weird. It still feels really weird. So I'm trying to get used to it.
I think we're all learning how to talk about and action social justice issues that are coming up, and really being in the uncomfortable conversations where we have to hold the space and we don't have the answers. And I think that just providing a forum and a safe place where it's a conversation to hear the stories, that you don't have to be perfect, you don't have to be an expert, and just be curious about your own development and what it triggers in you and how you can respond and react. I think just leaning into having those conversations could be quite courageous. And whether those conversations are about race, social justice, whatever is going on, even a project is super helpful. So our next tenet. I should know this. I'm sorry. Oh, it's perfect. It's gracious and grateful. So I think, Claudine, you agree on this because we've talked at length, but just, I'm impressed that people are showing up to work, to be honest. So that you show up to work is impressive in my book, with everything that's going on in cities and neighborhoods, in your homes. And I think this tenet is specifically geared to the fact that we want to hold the space for what people might be experiencing that we don't know, and whether or not we don't acknowledge it in the present moment or in a meeting or in quote unquote a work environment. I think that it's there. And so it's a new form of stress that we're dealing with. It's quite overwhelming. There's just a lot going on. And so we may not know how it's impacting others. And I do believe that mental health is of utmost importance right now, and just a top priority for leaders to consider of how things are affecting their employees.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. So you know what, Cecilia, we've actually been having so much fun that we're running out of time. So I think we might do one more tenet so we can leave time for time for Q&A. And maybe we end with the last tenet, if we can click forward to trust in our teams. Because I think that's a really good one that is something that we can lean into even more during this time.
Awesome. Yeah, I think the ones that we skipped were just instant meetings and experimenting with just modalities. So this one is trusting your team. So this is like a time and building on what I said earlier, just great ambiguity. There's a difference between managing and leading. And I think we have to have the confidence to trust the judgment of our teams and of the incredible talent that we've put in place, that we've selected, that we spent incredible amount of effort and time in selecting and hiring and developing the best. And we almost need to get out of the way. The reason that they're here is for their judgment and opinion, and we need to trust them accordingly. So that is our last tenet.
Absolutely. Okay, great. So excellent. So we've got a question here. This is a really good one. As a junior team member, how would you recommend presenting these ideas to a manager who have adopted the nonstop grind of working from home 24/7? That is a really good question. Do you want to start? What do you want? I'm gonna do this since I read it. You're gonna start the answer, Cecilia.
Okay, great. So if I understood it, just play it back. I am creative and it's nonstop grind, and I want to voice that this is not sustainable going forward. I think our point earlier that we thought that this was going to be 2 weeks, and it has been 4 months, and it will be potentially to the end of the year. I think in performing at a high stakes environment where it's high paced, athletes do this all the time. And I talk about being corporate athletes. You need to recover. You need the time and space to rest, to have breaks, and to not, if not, you're not going to perform at the level that you need it. And this is probably coming from previous work at Nike, but every athlete needs time to recover in order to perform at the level that they are expected to perform. And so that's how I would attack the conversation.
Yeah, I love that idea. And also, be honest. I think managers are responding more. I've been so impressed when people have reached out and said, I don't think I can take this one on, and just that honesty. And so, giving the benefit of the doubt that the humanity of it and being honest about it. I love this other question here. On the note of surviving from home, how have you defined the end of a workday, knowing there isn't much else going on? And on that note, how do you prevent burnout from team members who take on more than they should? I love this question because early on, there were certain leaders who were kind of saying, well, we'll just work on it over the weekend because, the days are all blending together. And I remember thinking, well, they're not for me. I actually really like hanging out with my family on the weekend. And then one of someone who was on my team mentioned that he had converted his commuting time to working time because he might as well. And we had a really good conversation of like, you know what, you shouldn't do that because that commute time was for you either listen to news time or deprogram time. So we're really watching to make sure that we have clear boundaries between, we actually start our days a little early at Amazon, generally 8 a.m. or if you're meeting with Europe, sometimes a little earlier if you're depending on time zones. I have not allowed my team to categorically just say we're going to start meetings earlier because people aren't commuting. It's still 9 to 5 are still work hours or whatever your company does, and not allowing that to creep beyond that I think is really important. It sends a really important signal. Same thing with that break in the middle of the day. You got those breaks in other ways that you're not getting anymore. So I think that's a really important one.
Yeah, I would add, so boundaries are key. I would time block. So according to tasks that you need to do, I think whatever you give a company, the company will take. And so if you don't have a ritual or a stopgap into your day, what I find is I'll go and join or do something exercise-wise just to get out of the house that's committed with other people, just so that I have that accountability to end the day. What's been interesting is I think there was an expectation at the very beginning that you could be a full-time employee, a full-time parent, and a full-time teacher. And that's just not realistic. And I've had plenty of conversations with colleagues over this, where you can't something has to trade off and something has to give in order for you to be able to stay sane.
That's so true. Great. So I'm going to keep answering questions until we're told we have to stop. So we're just taking over the 3% conference here. Who wrote these tenets, and how did you involve or not the broader team to encourage all to feel a sense of ownership and accountability to them. So I think one of the beautiful things about tenets is somebody does write them based on their observations, and then everyone gets a chance to debate them and edit them. And so we actually shared these in an all hands meeting, and we'll continue to evolve them and debate them. But tenets, usually one person just decides to write it down. But the beautiful thing about it is it's not set in stone. It's not a rule that everyone has to follow. And we have so many tenets for so many projects that sometimes I think we do too many of them. But they're not precious, and they're not meant to be do or die. They're really just things that we create together.
And I would add that we embrace conflict. So if you could think of a tenet as something where there was a difference of opinion, then that is usually a tenet-worthy statement to declare out loud and to say, okay, we differ in opinion. What do we believe? And let's work it through in writing and in narrative format.
I love that. We'll often
these tenets were just a group, like, I don't know if that was specific to tenets in general, or I think they're ever evolving and they're a living document. So I would take these with you and have the team kind of respond to them, alter them to what's appropriate to the culture within the team.
Yep, improve them. Awesome. Well, this has been so fun. Thank you for doing this with me, Cecilia, and thank everyone here for coming to this conference. It's a really important conference in the 3% movement. I'm so excited for all the goodness coming out of this and the changes that are going to come out of it.
Yes, thank you. It was such a pleasure.